let's talk about some decks that are kind of like one tier below that in the A tier decks. This is a deck that you might take to a big tournament, and you have some cool tech against Grixis that you want to try out, and these decks can win a tournament for sure. We have Esper midrange, Rakdos midrange that you already talked about. So those two decks, I think, are at the A tier, not quite as good as Grixis, but you do get the white cards with Esper, like Wedding Announcement. You get Wandering Emperor. You get AO if you wanted to play it. You get Liaisa if you wanted to play it. You get a lot of good sideboard cards like Destroy Evil that you can play in the sideboard. There's a lot of cards you can play in white. The mana is almost exactly the same as Grixis. You get the same number of pain lands. You get the tri-land as well from Esper and Grixis right now in Standard. So the mana base is the same, but you're putting the white cards in, but you're missing out on Blood Tithe Harvester, you're missing out on Corpse Appraiser, and you're missing out on Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And whether or not you can play Invoke Despair in either one of these decks, of course you can, but that big miss with Fable of the Mirror Breaker changes a lot of things from how your opponent can play against you, and it's kind of like a hit or miss. If you have your Wedding Announcements and your Fiend and your Wandering Emperor, but it comes at the price of not being able to play Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah, I think also looking at the color pips, this is more pip intensive. When I say color pips, you have certain like mana that you need to pay in order to make the spells work. And if you do look at this deck list, it's a little bit more color intensive than the Grixis build, where like on turn 2, you can have some things that are color intensive that you drew the right lands, which hopefully you did. So that can be something that causes it to stumble. And then, Grixis and some other decks have found ways to maybe exploit some of the things that Esper is doing. So I think that's probably why we see it take a step down, even though, I think there's a chance of it getting back up there in win percentage, because although Grixis won the World Championships, Esper midrange had a win percentage that was higher than Grixis midrange at that tournament. So I don't know. I think it's still something to keep your eye on. And I think between Esper and Grixis, it could be they could both be doing a little bit of swapsies as far as which one's S tier.
Right. One big thing that Esper has that kind of Grixis has with Fable the Mirror Breaker is Rafine, letting you churn through your deck and getting that draw discard and getting into the cards you need is very valuable. But the Grixis with Fable the Mirror Breaker is a little bit harder to interact with than Rafine is. Rafine has Ward 1, which is not nothing. But you can just cut down Rafine and pay the extra mana. You can't cut down a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Yeah, you can cut down the 2/2, but the other 2/2's coming in 2 turns, and you still get the draw discard. And if you don't deal with the 2/2, you get the treasure token to really churn through your deck and maybe have some turn 4 Invoke Despairs. So I think Grixis might edge out Esper because you get the almost guaranteed churn through your deck with Fable than you do with Rafine, and you also get the chance to turbocharge your deck with treasure tokens. So anyway, there's also Rakdos midrange, which doesn't play white with Esper and doesn't play the blue that Grixis plays. So you get to play a lot of some cards that are a little bit more intensive towards red and black mana. It's way easier for you to cast Invoke Despair. You can even dip into cards that usually mono black plays. You get to dip into like more Phyrexian Fleshgorger things. You get to, with double black pip, you get to dip into more Lilianas in the deck because that's double black pipped. You get to play maybe even the 1-drop the modal card that you can make a 2/2 and then a 3/3 Death Touch and then start drawing cards. You can play that. You get a little bit of a wider range of pipped cards, and it's even easier for you to play a card like Brotherhood's End post board because you are just 2 colors instead of 3. It's a little bit easier for you to cast double red on turn 3. So Rakdos midrange you already talked about before, but this is your deck, so I'll let you talk about it for a second.
Yes, thank you. So I like you mentioned all these solid points. The biggest solid point I think is you're smooth. You're silky smooth, like a fine whiskey on a cold campfire night.
Oh my goodness, let's not go that far. Okay, we're not an ASMR podcast.
Smooth, brother.
Smooth like honey whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? it's exactly what we're speaking into. I personally have built a list more. I built the list of Javier Dominguez, a former world champion. Um, and I really like his list. You get access to Two Brotherhood, and in the main, you get some Burn Down the House, which is huge. Like playing that against any deck that has like planeswalkers and creatures, or you can just attack for the win, which I've done with the 1/1s that it makes. I mean, deck is silky, silky, silky smooth. And you get access to both the best of red and black, which I don't know if y'all been listening for a while. Rakdos gang gang all day, all day, all day, all day.
Yeah, they know. They know, Michael. They know.
They know. Okay, they know. They know. Okay. So I think this thing has a lot of powerful stuff going on, and the consistency is really nice. I really don't know how to like. I beat a Grixis player today with it. I don't know, if there is 50,000 matches played between the Grixis player and the Rakdos player, which one would win. But I think Grixis wins as far as like it going against the whole metagame as a whole. So I think Rakdos mid range is sweet. And it's definitely a viable thing to take to your LGS or to a tournament. Just put in the reps, put in the repetitions, and I think it might treat you well.
But also put in the reputations.
Yeah, you have to be good with the Rakdos gang. I am a spokesman or ambassador of it. So if you want to get good with Rakdos gang, just speak to me.
Also, there's something that we didn't mention yet about Rakdos that gives it the edge against with Grixis and Esper against decks like mono white, blue white soldiers, and mono red, is that you don't have to pain yourself as much. And when you have to cast Rafine and you have like 2 pain lands, like you're really hurting. Like, or even 3 pain lands in Esper, like you're really hurting. If you have to cast a corpse appraiser in Grixis and you have like 3 pain lands, like you just lose to mono red and to all those decks. So having Rakdos not having as many pain lands, it's also worth mentioning.
And we have Reckoner Bankbuster in the main, which is like that card did so much work. Like you get to use Sulphurous Spring and only use the colorless. And sometimes you just get to play a Reckoner Bankbuster while you're kind of just playing the draw go thing, and you get to draw your card and leave up interaction. Your opponent doesn't know what you're doing, so also just super great, especially in Standard. I think in Standard, like something I've been learning in this like Standard set is like it pays dividends that you have mana sinks to do, but you have things to put mana sinks into, so your opponents don't know what you're doing. So
yeah, for sure, especially on Arena when there's like stops. And even if you don't have anything, you still get the stop for the Bankbuster.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of denies your opponent information in that way. All right, we have everything else outside of this, I think, has a long shot at winning a tournament, but in the right metagame could be good, and could give the top decks a run for their money for sure, but aren't quite there yet.